I hope that you're enjoying these teachings out of the book of 2nd Peter. And I just have to admit that talking about judgment is not people's favorite thing. But you know what? We need to realize that it's part of what's happening in the world, and it's going to happen in the world. You see, judgment is going to come. Even though it may not look like it right now, we serve a God who's a just God, and judgment will come upon the earth. Now, today we're in 2nd Peter, the 2nd chapter. We're going to be looking at and starting out with the last part of verse number 9. So if you have your Bibles, join with me as we read. And verse number 9 says this, "Then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from temptation, and to keep the unrighteous under punishment for the day of judgment." Now, let me just say this. Right now, there is not a judgment going on as far as the final judgment of a person. But right now, the Bible teaches here, and Peter writes here, that God is keeping the unrighteous under punishment for that day. You see, there is punishment for sin. Let me tell you something. Some of these diseases that are popping up, you know what they are? They are punishment for the sinful life a person's leading. There's a punishment for sin that we really don't talk about much, but that's just the absence of the peace and love and the joy that God and only God can bring. It's a punishment for sin. But the punishment for sin is not the final judgment. Someday, people, unless they turn to Jesus Christ for their salvation, are going to come to the final judgment. And when that judgment is offered, when that judgment is made, it's going to be too late for them. They will never be able to return. It's a judgment that's going to be eternal. So can you understand this? Right now, this world is living under the punishment of sin, but it's not the judgment. The judgment is going to come. You see, God's not standing there and saying, "Okay, you sin, bow, pow, pow." You know, I was raised in a church home, and you know what I was taught, that if I did something wrong, God was going to reach down from heaven and beat me on the head with the Bible. You know, that is so far from the truth. But sin does have a punishment. Sin does have punishment. If you beat your children, you know what? There's going to be a punishment that's going to come back upon you. If you get drunk and you kill somebody in a car accident, there's going to be a punishment for sin. If you live a life where you're just having unbridled sex, you know what? There's a punishment for sin, and it's called guilt. It's not a punishment from God, it's a punishment from sin. You see, sin always punishes. Now, keep in mind, again, going back to the scriptures before I get very sidetracked here, there is going to come a day of judgment. And those who have allowed sin to dominate and to rule their life, even though it's a punishing thing, those people are going to come to a final judgment. And if they don't turn to Jesus Christ, their lives are going to be sentenced for an eternity in hell. Now let's pick up in verse number 10. And it says, "And especially those who indulge in the flesh in its corrupt desires and despise authority." Now what's Peter doing? He's talking about this punishment of sin. And this punishment of sin is upon those who indulge in the flesh with its corrupt desires and despise authority. How many of you know that if you give yourself constantly over to the lusts of the flesh, to all the cravings that your flesh has, you are going to someday experience the decay and the punishment that giving yourself over to those desires has brought. And also, if you despise authority, Someday you're going to have to answer to authority. Someday you're going to have to answer, and maybe it's a police officer giving you a ticket or arresting you for a crime, but someday you're going to have to answer for what you did. And so that's what Peter is talking about here, but he doesn't end there. He says that these people are daring and self-willed, and they do not tremble when they revile angelic majesties. They're daring. In other words, they dare to do almost anything. What are they? They are self-willed. In other words, you can't tell me anything. I know what's right. I'm not going to listen to you. And then he goes on, and they do not tremble when they revile angelic beings. You know what? Some of this stuff that we see in the media, what is it? It's a reviling of angelic beings. When you make angelic beings and you laugh at them and you mock them, you know what? You're mocking the very thing that God sent to help you. Do you understand? It's dangerous ground. Now, verse number 11, whereas angels who are greater in might and power do not bring a reviling judgment against them before the Lord. These angels, they're not standing before the Lord saying, Lord, you saw what they did to me. No, they're not doing that. They're not bringing reviling judgment before the Lord. Do you understand? These angels are sent to correct you, to help you, to aid you in your life. Don't revile them. Don't treat them badly. They are not going to bring an accusation against you. Now, verse number 12. But these, like unreasoning animals, born as creatures of instinct, to be captured and killed, reviling where they have no knowledge, will in the destruction of those creatures also be destroyed. What is this? What's Peter talking about? He's saying that these people who have they're unreasonable animals. They're creatures of instinct. And what Peter is saying here is they're going to be captured, just like an animal is captured. And you know what? They're going to be captured and they're going to be killed, reviling where they have no knowledge. In other words, they're laughing and making up. The word reviling means partying, laughing at, a mockery. They have no knowledge of what they're mocking. And then at the very end, and will in destruction of those creatures also be destroyed. You see, we need to realize that the end is coming for these people. It may look like they're getting away with it, but you know what? They're not getting away with it. They're going to someday stand before God for all that they've done. Now, I hope that this is lit a fire underneath you, not a fire of condemnation and guilt or fear, but a fire for you to go out and to rescue the ungodly from the destruction that's going to come. You see, if you don't believe destruction's coming, there won't be a passion in you to rescue people. But if you really believe what Peter is writing here, you know what? In your heart as a believer, there's going to come a passion to rescue the ungodly. And now until we speak to you again, our prayer for you is that God will bless you and make you a strong witness.